Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited to have you all here for our Unique Careers webinar. Tonight's conversation is going to be all about celebrating the many paths people with T1D can take and exploring how adaptability, advocacy, and resilience can shape our careers and our confidence along the way. My name is Abby, and I have been living with T1D for over 18 years. I received my DHF scholarship in 2020, and I now work with DHF as a program facilitator, helping to lead community events and support programs for students and young adults living with T1D. Outside of my work with DHF, I've spent over 8 years teaching as a martial arts instructor, and I've also worked as a dance educator. Movement and teaching has always been a huge part of my life. And now I'm actually in my final year of Teachers College, where I'm teaching high school students social science and dance. I'm really honored to be your host tonight, wherever you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, as we highlight some incredible professionals who have built meaningful, fulfilling careers while navigating life with T1D. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to our four speakers tonight, Peter, Scotia, David, and Camille. Each of them bring a unique perspective to tonight's discussion, from managing T1D on the job to advocacy and communication, resiliency and adaptability, and their best advice for others in our community. Before we jump in to our discussion topics, I'd love to invite each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. David, I will have you take it away.
Sure. So my name is David. I was diagnosed about 30 years ago now. I got a Hope Scholarship when I finished high school, and then I went on to study dance for about 5 years, and then I worked as a professional dancer for about 15. I'm now a sports massage therapist, so I have lots of different experience doing events and traveling and all kinds of different schedules and levels of exercise, mainly very high. I've also worked in the mentorship program with the Hope Foundation, and I've done lots of studies to advance the research on diabetes with different groups. I've done also a lot of traveling for work and personal. I love traveling, so that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, David. So lovely to have you with us tonight. And I will now throw it off to Scotia.
Hi, everybody. So my name's Scotia. I work for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans here in Vancouver. My team is responsible for studying several types of whales in the waters around BC, mainly southern resident killer whales, which is an endangered population. It's been a really rewarding job working in conservation. I get to do a lot of amazing things and see a lot of amazing places. I've truly fallen in love with the West Coast, and I feel very lucky to be working in fisheries.
Thank you so much, Scotia. I have such a fascination for marine life, so I'm so excited to be able to hear the stories that you're going to bring to tonight's conversation. I will now throw it off to Peter.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for Abby. Thank you for pulling this together tonight. I think this is just great. It's great to share with one another some of the experiences we've all had and some of these unique things that we do as people with diabetes. I just recently retired as a firefighter with the City of Toronto. I spent 36 years there. I was the first person with type 1 diabetes to become a operations firefighter in Canada. And it was quite a fight at the time, and one that, with a lot of help, we were able to succeed with. And it meant some very, very significant changes to not only the profession of firefighting, but also policing in a big way. There were a number of professions out there that said, well, if you have type 1 diabetes, you can't do this. And so my experience was quite a unique one. And I just found myself in a circumstance that allowed me to help make that change. Imagine the toughest work that you can do. Now imagine doing it wearing about 45 pounds of gear and walking into a building that is 850 degrees Celsius and doing it in the middle of the night after having been at a dead sleep 3.5 minutes earlier. That is what firefighting is like. So for a person with type 1 diabetes, you can imagine there are some real challenges, but it's very rewarding. And frankly, everybody on this call and in the world of people with diabetes is capable of taking on those kind of challenges. It's up to you. It's not up to the rest of the world. And that's the point I just want to make here tonight. Thank you, Abbi.
Thank you so much, Peter. I love that mindset that you're bringing to the table tonight. I really do connect to that. And then last but not least, Camille.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Abby. I think it's amazing to hear about all these different stories, like everybody else just said, and see all the different jobs that we're able to do living with type 1 diabetes. I'm Camille. I am from Ontario, Canada. I grew up as a ski racer my whole life. That was my main thing. And after I graduated university, I decided to travel down to New Zealand and become a ski coach down there. I was only kind of doing it as like a thing after university, and then I kind of ended up taking me to some really cool places. So I've stuck with it, and I'm super grateful that I can have an impact on these young athletes who are chasing the same dreams that I once did. And so now that actually brought me to a international ski academy here in France. But yeah, I coach a U16 group, so they're 14, 15 years old, and their parents ship them off from all over the world to come here and live here with the ski coaches and teachers and house parents and everything. So yeah, I'm super happy that I can have an impact on their career here, and it's a job that I am super grateful to have. And on the other side, I don't deal with fires. I'm constantly in the cold. I'm in the snow at high altitude, so it's crazy to see the other side of it, how every one of these experiences has an effect on our blood glucoses in different ways. And I'm still able to do it, and I'm super grateful for that. So that's a little about me.
Thanks so much, Camille. Your perspective on like the different countries that you've gone to and your travel stories, I'm sure are one in a million. So we are going to jump right in and we are going to kick things off with David, who will be speaking about managing T1D on the job. So David, how have you managed your T1D while meeting the physical and mental demands of your work? And what strategies help you stay safe and balanced throughout the day?
It's a great question, and it's a very individual question as well. So for me, it was a lot of trial and error in the beginning, and then it came with preparation. So knowing how to prepare is the biggest part of preparing. So for me, it was a lot of having problems, encountering problems, and then figuring out how to fix them. And then remembering that so that the next time I didn't encounter the same problems. Now, it would often be new problems and different problems, so it didn't mean that everything went easily. And there's a big difference between physically demanding job or sport or pleasure activity or whatever you're doing that takes physical energy, and also the mental aspect of it. Because the mental aspect has your part, so you can prepare and you do your things and you're ready. But then there's everyone around you also who, so dance is a very high performance and precarious sector. There's not a lot of funding, there's not a lot of jobs, there's not a lot of people who are willing to take on a risk. And I think having diabetes is also seen as sort of a weakness from people who don't understand it, or seen as a risk factor. And so you have to be prepared for that as well. And so there's the whole physical aspect, which I think most people understand. I'll go over it quite quickly, but it entails, having your basal rates and your boluses all calculated and knowing how much you're consuming in terms of glucids and how much you're exporting in terms of kilocarbs and everything that you're using so that you can balance it all. But we all do that every day, and that's basically the baseline for life with diabetes, right? So we all do that. And then the preparation beyond that is, let's say I've got a 4-hour rehearsal, and so I know that I won't have a break for 4 hours. I prepare for that. It's all good. And then at the end of 4 hours, it's not over. And then we need to fix something. Somebody gets injured. So now we have another 2 hours. We have another 4 hours. And so then this in the beginning is unprecedented. And so you have to sort of figure it out on the fly. But then eventually you go, okay, well, I understand now this is a possibility. I could end up rehearsing another 4 hours or another 6 or another 10. And there are days where you have 12, 14, 16-hour days and you're at the theater. You can't go out. You can't get a snack. You can't order from the restaurant or whatever you need. And so that's a big part of the managing is just being prepared. So having the things you need and knowing what you might need in case. In terms of the mental aspect, which I think is maybe a little bit more interesting because it's different than what we hear about all the time from all of the dietitians and nutritionists and doctors who are very good and who teach us this from a very young age. My eldest brother actually has diabetes, so I was born into a family that was already in the routine of seeing endocrinologists and dietitians and everything and all the way through. So I grew up basically from birth with this knowledge of how to deal with this. However, once you get a job, it's sort of important. You're sort of always on the edge because you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to get replaced by someone else. I was also basically self-employed the whole time. I had a full-time job with a company for 3 years, but otherwise I was self-employed. So it's also a question of security and finances and everything. So they will judge you, not just based on what you're doing for work, which is the show or the rehearsal or whatever it is, but based on what you're eating, what type of snacks you're bringing in, how your energy is that day, how your emotions are that day. And so that has a big effect on the confidence that you have, which then affects your capacity to do things, which then affects your job. And so all of those things you also have to be prepared for. So if somebody is doubting in me, then I have to either be able to explain it or to accept it and then move on to the next thing. So there's a big question for me of the psychological management that diabetes comes with that we don't necessarily talk about as much, but other people's perceptions of what it is in the beginning and then of how you are. Like, for example, oh, you look tired today. Well, maybe I'm at 12 and I'm not at 5. And so I'm having a little bit harder time doing the same thing when it's really just a question of that. Or maybe I was low yesterday and so I'm still feeling a little groggy or whatever it is. And these are things that I can't really change and I can't really make somebody completely understand. So obviously, if you have someone in the entourage that can help you manage these things, that can get on board with you and help sort of explain to others, oh, it's just, it was tough yesterday because we only got 3 hours of sleep. It was on a bus, and so we were going to the next city, and we're also in a new time zone, and so it's a little trickier, and the sugars weren't great, so maybe we'll just take it easier today for rehearsal or something like that. If that's a possibility, great. That's an ideal situation. Often it's not, and so then with these changing schedules and always adapting to these new things, you also have to just be willing to accept that some days are not as perfect as others, but you still have to do everything.
Regardless of how you feel, you still have to show up. I love what you said about, just being prepared, knowing yourself, but then also knowing and being able to look into the future and be proactive rather than reactive to the T1d, which I think a lot of people can relate to. Scotia, how about you? What do you find, best helps you with the managing the physical and mental, and what strategies do you use while out on the water?
So my job really entails long stretches of time where you might not be able to give yourself insulin. I'm still on injection, so you might not be able to inject yourself for a while. Say we're on the boat and part of my job entails encountering killer whales. And once we're on the whales, we have to follow them and take photo IDs, take pictures of them to make sure we know who we're following. And encounters can last hours. And during those encounters, there's only 3 people on our small boats. And we have to be constantly watching the whales, making sure the boat operator is driving within a appropriate distance and everything like that. So you don't really have much time to say if my blood sugar was high. It's very hard for me to say, okay, everybody, wait a second, I need to go back and inject or manage my glucose in that way. So being proactive and being prepared is super valuable. So just making sure that my blood sugars are in check throughout the day, anticipating an encounter later in the day. That also goes for lab work as well. So I work in the lab when it's not field season here. Lab procedures can also take a long time. And many times you can't just leave in the middle of a procedure because you have chemicals and you have, reagents developing and stuff like that. So exactly the same problem there. What I found does help, specifically to like lab work, is to come up with a backup plan and always tell my supervisor if I'm feeling low, for example. That has happened before where I'm in the middle of a procedure and I start to feel low and I tell her, hey, I need to take some sugar right now. Can you do this for me? Or can this wait for another 10 minutes? So just like communicating is super, super important and something I do a lot. Another thing to manage highs I find in the field is I do tend to go a little high because it's a more stressful environment. We're out on the boat for long days, like 12 hours a day. It's not my usual schedule. We're sleeping not in my own bed, very, very long days. So making sure to take the time to myself at the end of a field day, if that means going for a walk alone and listening to an audiobook or calling my family, just taking some time to de-stress when in the field really helps to manage my blood sugar, I've really noticed. Yeah, so those are very specific to my job, but they've really helped me as a type 1.
No, absolutely. And I think that a lot of people can relate to, and it sounds like what kind of helps you, Scotia, is that when you're out on the water, like when you're in that field work, keeping yourself maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit more helpful so that you're not worrying about those lows. Was I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, because sometimes we don't stop for food or lunch or anything. So yeah, I do tend to run a little bit higher when I'm on the boat for that exact reason.
Now, Peter, I'm interested to know what your skills on managing T1D are and were when you were a firefighter, being in that really stressful, active situations.
First of all, I just want to speak to what David was saying, always learning every day, every minute about yourself and the way in which you manage yourself. That's a very strong point for everybody who's listening. You just have to be better at this every day that you live with it. And eventually you get really pretty good at it. I had diabetes for 10 years before I became a firefighter. I couldn't imagine developing diabetes as a firefighter because you're so inexperienced at it. But I had 10 years of experience. And I'm kind of just curious, Scotia, are you a scuba diver?
I'm not a scuba diver. I want to be, though.
Okay, well, that was my first challenge before becoming a firefighter. And, now I'm a level 2 scuba diver. So everything's possible. I mean, when I first wanted to be a level 1 diver, I went to a doctor. I was away at school at the time and went to a doctor who I didn't know and said, I'd like to be a scuba diver. And he lost his brains. I mean, he just, oh, no, you can't be a scuba diver. I mean, it's too risky, and I can't sign that. And, I went back home to my own doctor and he said, there's no reason why you can't be a scuba diver. I've seen what you do and what you can do. And he's like, hand me the form. Diabetes is a disease about responsibility. You have to make a decision very early on in your diabetes life about, do you want to be responsible managing your health and your care, or do you not? And if you do, the reality is you're going to be healthier than all of your peers without diabetes. You are going to be a better employee than all the peers in your workplace. You're going to be a better dancer, a better marine biologist, a better firefighter than everybody else, because you come in with a mindset of always wanting to manage things with some carefulness and some planning and some preparation and responsibility that leads to good outcomes. And you learn that as a person with diabetes. I always had something in my pocket so that if I found myself in a situation where I was just totally, utterly exhausted, and it happens, one of my first experiences of just total physical exercise beyond what I had ever experienced before. I've done on the floor chest compressions on somebody about 100 times in my career. Now, I don't know if there's anybody on the call tonight who's done CPR on somebody or even on a mannequin. But like oftentimes that process goes on for 35 to 40 minutes. And chest compressions are a lot of work. And like it is physical, hard exercise. Now, one person doesn't do it. We, in the business I was in, we'd switch it up every 2 minutes. You do chest compressions for 2 minutes, you'd be out for 2 minutes. And then you'd switch up and be back in for 2 minutes. 2 minutes is just enough time to consume something. You give yourself that added boost so you're good for the next 20, 25 minutes of doing CPR. And you just have to plan and be responsible. And I will just say to the mental and the communication part, not everybody needs to know you have diabetes. The people who need to know are the people who need to know. You don't need to advertise to the entire club, the entire team, the entire workplace that you're in. You need to tell the people who are around you and working with you side by side to say to them, listen, sometimes I need just to take a break. I need to check my blood. I tap my phone to my arm and just explain it to them. They will have an admiration for what you are able to manage beyond what they are even doing. And I think it's important to recognize there is no shame in having diabetes. In fact, the people who are applying for our scholarships and receiving them are the best of the best at everything they do. And the irony of this is diabetes actually helped make them like that. And so that's the lesson for everybody about this disease. Don't let it control you, you control it.
You mentioned something really interesting, Peter, about keeping something in your pocket, which I'm sure that Camille also has some experience with while being up in the snowy mountains. So Camille, tell us, what strategies do you use to kind of keep yourself physically and mentally safe?
Yeah, I'm outside pretty much all day, and like David said, to speak to his point of the fact that you're constantly learning, I think that's something that's across the board for all type 1 diabetics. Like you're truly just learning each and every day, every year, every new challenge you encounter shows up also in your diabetes, and like that was something that happened for me moving to where I now live and coach, which is at 2,100 meters of elevation. And I had skied at high elevation before, but I guess not long enough to notice its effect on my blood sugar. And then after living here, I was like, I need so much less insulin. This is actually insane. Like it was like up to 10 units a day for my long-acting insulin because like Scotia, I also was on injections for the past 5 years now. I just recently went back on the pump, but when I was on injections, I was taking a lot less insulin when I was up at high altitude and I guess working a physical job. But yes, I definitely always have something in my pocket. Bows are my go-to. I love those things. I always have an extra in my pocket so that even when I bring my bag up coaching for the day, because we're usually in a specific area, I'll have like extra snacks and stuff in there. But I make sure to always have something in my pocket so that if I'm doing a lap or off skiing on another side of the mountain with my athletes, then I always have something on me. And I also keep my insulin on me at all times. I'll be in a pocket where it's not affected by the cold temperatures. So these are kind of all the backup things that you make sure that are available to you while you're on the job. But one thing that I truly like try to make sure that I do properly every day is eat a good breakfast that I know will keep my blood sugar stable and not have me spike or drop, because like right in the morning we go up to the hill, we're carrying tons of equipment, big gates, drills, everything so that we go set the course for our athletes. And so you kind of have to be on as soon as you're up in the morning, and you have to be ready to set the course, and which is really physical. And so obviously I don't want to get up there and say, "Oh, I can't do this right now. I can't do my job. Like you're counting on me. We're rushed because we have to follow other teams and set the course before they do." And so I just want to make sure that like I'm stable as soon as I start my work day, so that everybody kind of gets the best out of it, and I get the best out of it. They get the best version of me. And so I pretty much eat the same thing for breakfast every day. It's like piece of sourdough, some eggs, some avocado, as low glucose as possible, as low sugar, and but just with something to hold me over until I'm able to get an extra snack after we've done the whole morning setup and everything. But yeah, there is something to say about having a physical job. Obviously, it comes with its own challenges that we've all encountered in different ways. But I'm extremely grateful to have a job where I'm able to move my body every day, because it makes managing diabetes so much easier. And like Peter was saying, you are the one that's going to be on top of your health. You place more importance on it, on the things you eat, the things you do. And I notice a huge difference when I'm not moving my body versus when I am. So, yes, it's hard. There's more planning, like we said, that goes around it. But I am super, super grateful to have a job where I'm able to move every day.
Now, Camille, I'm actually going to open this up to the four of you, but I'm going to start with you. When you are actively teaching or skiing, do you keep, like, it sounds like you actually keep the insulin with you. Have you ever had a situation where it freezes or something has happened to the insulin?
I actually haven't. Like, I haven't noticed I have had any issues with like the freezing or anything. I've been pretty lucky with that, but I always make sure, sometimes I do realize that it's getting cold, but I try to make sure I have it like on an inside pocket or something, because if I'm freezing, then my insulin's probably freezing. So enough layers on my body and then inside my jackets and stuff to avoid that. But yeah, that's a good question. No, I haven't had any issues with it freezing though.
Scotia, how about you? When you're on the boat and in the lab, do you keep things nearby, like extra injections, needles?
Yeah, so on the boat, we wear these big like Helly Hansen jackets, and we wear not waders, but like boat pants essentially. Like they look like overalls, but they're waterproof. So there's a lot of layers to get through whenever I need to give myself an injection, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, I always keep my needle in my pocket, and the needle caps as well in my pocket. And whenever I have a chance, or if we do get to break for lunch, luckily the bibs that we wear have a little zip on the side, so I usually just unzip my jacket, unzip that, and then I can inject kind of into my leg, which is really handy to have those zippers. Yeah, so I definitely do keep it on me on the boat. Not as much in the lab because it's all in the same building, so I just come up to my office or whatever if I need to inject here. But it's always close. It's always close by.
Now, I don't know why I never thought of this for people like Peter, Scotia, Camille, who wear these heavy uniforms at their work. It never even crossed my mind that for people who take injections, that would be a potential barrier. Peter, did you keep your insulin and extra supplies on you, or was that in the truck?
I would typically have a little kit that's on the vehicle, the apparatus. Sometimes if we were being moved forward or something, I'd put it on my person so as to be able to have it with me. I will just say everybody's advocated now that you go to these shorter and shorter and shorter pen needles. And I said to my pharmacist, he said, "Oh, like, why are you using these long ones?" He said, "The shorter ones are more effective and they're easier to take." And I said to him, I'll be honest with you, it's because I have to put them through Nomex or what I'm wearing, because I just am not in a position to untuck my shirt and pull it up and go into my abdomen. I'm like, the funny part is it's sort of become a part of my routine now. It's just what I do. If it's too difficult I just cut the corner. And so we have a couple of friends who are nurses, and they've seen me do this at dinner. Of course, it blows their mind. They're like, "Oh no, you can't go through denim." I'm like, "Well, I actually have for quite a long time." So it's very funny, but they're of course of the view you should wipe with an alcohol swab and let it dry for 30 seconds. And and I'm like, I worked in a career in which I couldn't do that. And it's kind of like the old Marine Corps motto, improvise, adapt, and overcome. Sort of the diabetes motto. And that's what we do. And we all do it in whatever we're doing, whatever we're working with, whatever we're presented with. That's what you do to manage what you're trying to get done.
That is what works for you. And, being adaptable is one of, I think, T1D's most strongest qualities. Now, David, you have a very different point of view with this because you don't wear a very heavy uniform, either when you're dancing or when you're working as a massage therapist. So what has your experience been? Where do you keep your stuff with you?
Well, I also keep everything nearby, just in case. It depends on the situation for me. I'm also in injections. I tried once a long time ago a pump and it came off, I think, 2 minutes in or something. And I was like, well, I guess that's not going to work. And so I never tried it again. I have, however, have found some success in getting the CGMs to stay on. So that's good because when I originally tried them, they didn't stay on either. But now the newer versions will stay, so I can keep that on. It's only I've had a couple of comments from choreographers who feel like it doesn't fit into the vision that they have for their costumes because it creates a slight bump, which is very slight, but nonetheless, I have had some comments about it. Usually, it's not so bad for me because for example, in rehearsal, I can run to the side quickly, inject, eat whatever needs, and then come back. What's hard for me is durational performances, which I don't know if you guys know what that means, but it's like an environment that is a performance. So the people who are coming to see the show will sort of come in and they'll stay for 20, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever it is. But we're sort of performing for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. It's something that you'll sometimes see at like white night events where we will do something all night. And so it's like an integrative environment, if you will. And so it's a performance over a long period of time. And so then it gets a little bit more complicated on where to have it because I can't keep it on me while I'm performing, but I need it close enough that if something does happen, I have access to it quickly enough to go get it and then get back into performance mode or performance area where it is. And so usually there is some sort of dressing room type area, which is not necessarily an adjoined room, but sometimes it's just a table nearby, or we can leave a bag or a water bottle or something like that. And so in general, I can leave my stuff at that same spot because people without diabetes also need to hydrate or go to the bathroom or do things that humans just need to do from time to time. And so I just sort of integrate my diabetic needs into that same sort of sphere. And so for me, it hasn't been too problematic. And I think I'm probably among the efficiency rate that's quite good for getting an injection, having it, getting back out to get to work, or consuming as I think I've told you this anecdote, but consuming juice as quick as you can to get back on stage. And so I think I've not mastered, but I've gotten quite far along the road to doing that quickly and efficiently.
So I love what you're talking about, which ties really nicely to Camille. I'm going to start you off. Two-prong question. One, how has living with T1D influenced your resilience and adaptability? And then if you were to give one piece of advice or a key lesson to someone about balancing T1D with your work, what would it be?
As I said before, I was an athlete my whole life. And at 13, I was unexpectedly diagnosed. And so you learn to navigate a new reality, and there's nothing else to do but to go on and you figure it out. And 13 years later, I'm still figuring it out. And there, like we said before, there's always new stuff to learn. Yeah, I've always been driven by competition. Like I'm not fun to play cards with unless I'm winning. But diabetes kind of like turned into that challenge for me as well, that like how can I be the best at this? How can I take the most control? How can I feel my best? How can I get the best out of it? And throughout my career in sports, I had a lot of injuries. So I made it to the onto the Ontario ski team, where I was a member of that for 3 years. And then my first season, I tore my ACL and had to have reconstructive surgery right before the first race. And then the next year came around, and I did a few races and had to have another knee surgery. And then I had to the next year and had another few injuries. So I mean, I had a lot go against me, but I kind of always knew, like, as hard as it is with diabetes, you kind of know that no matter what happens, you're gonna figure it out. You're gonna find ways to move on from it and to build from it. And they are hard lessons, but at the end of the day, they make you who you are. And it just shows you how many different things that life can throw at you, and you know that you can overcome them.
I think that the message that you're sending is very powerful, just staying with it and again, just learning. Peter, same thing. How has resiliency and just being able to adapt to different situations impacted your work life? And again, that key piece of lessons that you want to share with people.
I guess, like, I was always determined to prove that I was as good and capable of being there. In fact, I argue better, because I was putting more effort into it. And frankly, it meant a lot more being there because of what I had to overcome. It's a tough career to get into for somebody who doesn't have diabetes. Same as skiing, same as dance, same as being, out on the ocean in a small watercraft. Like, that's tough work, and it's not for everybody. It's even tougher for somebody who has diabetes and is managing diabetes. There was a certain determination and resolve that came over me. And when I was first thinking of applying for this, I was coming out of university, and a friend of the family said to me, you should think of doing this. And because he was in the profession, I said, oh, I'm not sure that's right. And he said, no, I think it's the right fit for you. And something that convinced me was, he said, listen, try it. And if you do it for a couple of years and decide you don't want to do it, go do something else. But he said, it looks pretty good on a resume to say you worked as a firefighter for a couple of years. And then when I applied, and I ended up in a terrible, terrible fight with them, because they didn't know it yet, but they didn't hire people with diabetes. But after they got a bit of a bloody nose in that fight, and the city of Toronto had to roll over, the rest of the fire departments in the entire country had to roll over. Because you can't make the argument that the largest fire department in Canada can accept people with diabetes. And the trucks I was on, those trucks were doing 2, 3, and 4,000 calls a year. So a shift is 24 hours. It's a long go. It is tough work, and you have to manage, and you have to act, and you have to be responsible. After I got there, I just was so determined to prove to them, not only had they made the right decision by changing the policy for hiring people with diabetes into firefighting, I was just also determined that I wanted them to realize they were missing a great opportunity by not hiring people with diabetes. And since then, quite a number of young people have come on to the Toronto ranks who have diabetes. So I can't tell you how that really inspires me. But you just have to push. You have to push, push, push.
And so for you to kind of go above and beyond and say, I am going to be that best firefighter, whether I have T1D or not, that type of mindset, that is what I hope that the people who are listening and watching tonight, that is, a key takeaway that they take with them. Thank you so much. Scotia, same thing with you. Resiliency, adaptability, advice.
I really think that resiliency is a brilliant word to describe people living with type 1 diabetes as a whole. For me, at least, I think that's really integrated in all aspects of my life. First off, having diabetes, there's no quitting it. There's no stopping. You have to be resilient because it's going to be with you every single day of your life. Second, and this is kind of a different take that I kind of thought about, was being a resilient person. I was also drawn to a career that kind of focuses on resiliency. People who are drawn towards careers in conservation, we want our ecosystems to be resilient, and we want the species that we're concerned with to be resilient. And so that's just another way that I kind of have integrated resiliency into my life in a very different way. But I think part of having type 1 shows me and other folks with diabetes that resiliency is possible and it really pays off. As for advice, I would always just say advocate for yourself. I know when I first started this job or in other jobs in the past, I'd be a little nervous to tell people, oh, I need to stop to have some sugar, or I'm not feeling so well, because I wanted to do the best. And Camille, I can resonate with you as well. Like, I'm a little competitive and I want to be the best at whatever I do. So I never wanted to take a break if I needed sugar. I never wanted to make it look like I'm not as hard a worker as someone else. But guaranteed, every single time I've communicated my needs as a type 1 diabetic, everyone has been supportive. It's never been a bad thing when I've told people I need to take a break or anything like that. And I always find that people are really interested as well. They want to learn more. And it feels really great just to have that support from coworkers, peers, family, and friends.
And so for you, Scotia, I love that you've had that positive experience. I'm sure that some of us listening tonight may have not had as great of experience as you, but hearing that there are T1Ds who, when they communicate and they're being able to advocate for themselves, like, hey, I need to take a break, and it's non-negotiable. Like, I'm more telling you that I'm taking a break rather than asking. That self-advocacy is a really important skill that I think that a lot of T1Ds who are older still need to learn how to do. So I think that is such a great piece of advice. David, I will throw it off to you.
I completely agree. I think that the self-advocacy is probably the biggest thing to pass on to anybody. I'm going to start with the advice, obviously, because we're in it. But I think that society generally is willing to try to understand. And so I think more and more it's accessible, the different types of knowledge, and I think people are willing to do that, and there's a push for inclusion and accepting differences and things like that. And so I think that the biggest thing is just to be self-aware and willing to put ourselves out there as we are, and not trying to pretend or hide behind anything else to be like everyone else, because as we've been saying, it creates this wonderful person with resiliency and adaptability and determination and all kinds of different management planning that we've integrated into ourselves without even sort of realizing it. And so I think it's just to see that there is a value in that, and that it's part of us whether we want it or not. And it's just as important as anything else. Like, if you have to take a break because you have to sneeze, or you gotta go somewhere, like, and these basic human needs, and it's part of that. And so I think it's super important to have that sort of self-awareness and self-reflection to know how to present it, but also that it's just a normal thing to present. It's just a part of yourself. You don't have to show it off and like put it as the number one thing about you, but just like, you might want to listen to a certain type of music, you might want to eat some sugar sometimes.
Before we end, I know that David, Peter, and Scotia did talk about communicating and talking to their work people about T1D. Camille, I did just want to ask you, what is it like, one, being in another country and potentially talking to people, maybe even with a language barrier about T1D, if you could give us some quick insights.
I think that like overall the knowledge on type 1 diabetes in the general population is quite limited. I think that like most things that people know about diabetes is about type 2. So communicating like what it actually means, what it is, how it affects my life, like to the people like we said who need to know is important. But yeah, everybody's super open. I mean, I grew up speaking French my whole life, so with the French people I can communicate it pretty well. With others, they tend to speak English pretty well, so it's pretty good. Like they're all very open and supportive. And I actually wrote like a little note saying because it's funny that the nurse of the school, she's also type 1 diabetic. And so she wrote this whole post the other day that was like an urgent thing to all student and staff that there's like a storage of candies and whatever sugar in the canteen and it's only for type 1 diabetics for the two of us and for people visiting the academy who might have type 1. So I got a laugh out of that. I thought that was pretty funny. So I definitely feel supported. And I have another person who works in the academy who's going through the same thing. So it's rare, but it's cool. So, but people are very open and very supportive. But definitely advocate for yourself, let the people know because that is definitely something I've started to do in recent years. And I should have been doing from the beginning because there's nothing to be ashamed of.
I love that inclusion piece that you and the nurse have your own little
Yeah.
stash and
Yeah,
no.
we're like we have our own little club. Nobody's allowed to touch it.
I love that. For our panelists, is there any last pieces of advice or a topic that we didn't touch on that you want to add? Please feel free to do so.
Like, I'll just say that people with diabetes sometimes bring a knowledge of diabetes that everybody else doesn't have. And I should tell everybody on the call that in addition to what you've heard I do, I'm also the chair of the board of the Diabetes Hope Foundation. And we bring a knowledge to people who don't have an understanding about diabetes. And the mentorship program has been a great program for us because it just basically teams up somebody who's a little further down the road of diabetes and post-secondary education, and it matches them with somebody who's looking for guidance. And there's always going to be people you're going to run into in your life who don't know anything about diabetes, and suddenly they need to because they have a family member, a friend, or somebody. Being that person who is that inspiration can be really life-changing for somebody by saying, listen, I've been down this road. I know what this is like, and this is manageable. And in fact, you will thrive as a result of what this disease is going to teach you. And that will be to, somebody who is a child who's newly diagnosed, or a parent of a child who is newly diagnosed, or a peer, a friend, a work colleague, somebody like that. So we bring knowledge about this disease that even the people who in the medical profession at times don't have or should have. Don't be ashamed of telling people you have diabetes. Use it as just another, badge of honor in your long resumes of skills because it can be very beneficial to somebody.
What a great way to end our Unique Careers webinar. Thank you, David, Peter, Camille, and Scotia for joining, for sharing your stories, for sharing your wisdom, your advice, everything. I know that I had just a wonderful time chatting and listening and learning, and I'm sure that the people who are listening learned so, so much. So thank you to the four of you for joining, for chatting. We really appreciate it. Thank you again.